Dan, and in this video we're going to look at the game instance blueprint. So this short series of videos that I'm doing on my channel are all about what I call the essential blueprints, and these are blueprints where there is usually a default version of the blueprint, and there has to be some version of this kind of blueprint for Unreal to be working, and they are you can override them by creating your own version and adding functionality to them. As I say, I call these the essential blueprints. There's quite a few of them, and in this case we're going to be looking at one that's called the game instance blueprint. So I want to kind of explain what it is a little bit and why we're doing it. In one of the previous videos, we looked at the game level blueprint, which is the blueprint you can access through this little widget up here. And this is a blueprint that is where you can add functionality to the level itself, which is the world that you're currently in. And that's slightly different from the other essential blueprints in that it's not one that you kind of tell Unreal which one you want and how to plug it in. But the problem with the level blueprint is that it only has any persistent information for this particular level. So if you've got a game that's all one level and you want some persistent information, that's fine, and it's an okay place to put it. There are some other issues, which are that communicating with it is quite a complicated process to actually make that happen. And there are other easier things that you can do. It can the level blueprint can communicate with any elements in the level, so objects that are appearing in the level are really easy to get a contact to from the level blueprint. So the game instance blueprint is a higher level blueprint in that it stays and is persistent through when you load in different levels. So it's more suitable for game level stuff. There are some wrinkles with it as well. Now, before I go on, I do want to also mention that there are now, I think they're relatively new to Unreal. There are another couple of these essential blueprints called game state and player state. And the documentation seems to imply that game state is an even better place to put meta information. But I had a play with it, and it broke the project, and I couldn't manage to make it work. So I don't know how to use those properly yet. But I do know how to use the game instance, and it's still working, despite the fact that the game state is still there. Right. A lot of talk. Let's, well, it's all talk anyway, but let's actually show some stuff as well. So let's show you quickly the setup that I've got here. I've got a standard third-person template map, and actually this is just, it's similar to the end of the previous video in the series, which was about the player controller, in which we had a situation where you got the normal avatar up here, and if I press the E key, I can switch to that other one that we can see over there. So E, that was just demonstrating that. Okay, but what I've done is I've added, I've added a couple of things. The first thing I've added is I've got a little pad that I can stand on, and that pad is programmed to be a portal, which will take us to a different level. And I've actually created a second level. It's very similar to the first level, because all I've done is copy the first level and make a few basic changes. If I stand on that pad, it will load the second level, and you'll see we're flicking into it. Now this is slightly different because that male avatar is on this rotating platform, which we created in the previous tutor. The pad itself is there, and there's a big block here that's missing, so all I did was delete that block. And there's a second pad here, and this pad is very similar to the first pad. They both use the same blueprint, but they've got a different variable to tell you which level they're going to take you to. Go on that, and it takes you back to the original level. I spent quite a while playing with the idea of, can I get it so that when you stand on it, it spawns you in exactly the same place in the level. And I gave up because it started to become quite complicated. I do believe that it's possible, but it's not set up as an easy thing to do. And I think the reason for that is that they don't expect you to have two levels which are almost identical in layout. If you wanted to achieve this kind of fact, actually you'd probably use the same level and then just hide things or move things rather than switching level. Anyway, the point of having two levels here was to be able to prove to you that information in the game instance blueprint is persistent when you change levels. So I've set up this little mechanism. I'm not going to talk through how I've done that because that's not the function of this video. Right, so I'm going to go out of that, and this is how you create your own game instance. So like other things, it's creating a blueprint, and just right-click in the content area, or use any of the other methods of creating a blueprint, and go to blueprint class. Now, this isn't one that comes up in this list of common ones here, and so I have to type in. Just going to zoom in here, but I'm going to type in game instance. And there we go. So that gives us a game instance, and just come down a bit. So the blueprint's appeared here. I'm just going to rename it to my instance. So what I often do, on this occasion, I'm not particularly using prefixes to the new things that I'm creating. What I often do when I'm doing a proper project is I have a prefix which is to do with the name of the game or the project in some way, and I put that at the start of all the stuff that I create, which makes it a lot easier to find them when we get drop-down boxes and filters that you might want to be using. So the next thing we need to do is, at the moment, the game is still using the standard game instance blueprint, and we need to tell it that it needs to use this one instead, so that when we add functionality to it, that functionality is actually in the game. Otherwise, we'll be adding lots of functionality to this game instance blueprint, but it won't have any effect on the game at all. So the way to do this is to go into Edit and Project Settings, and there's a link here to the Maps and Modes settings. I'm going to zoom in. I pressed the wrong key there. Here we go. So there's various things here now. We've seen the player controller class, and if you've been watching through this video as a series, there's game mode, which we're going to deal with in the next video, and then in the final video in the series, we'll talk very quickly about the others. But what we need to do is to actually scroll down to the very bottom of this, which is where the game instance class is. And we've got a drop-down box there, and we can search for it. Well, there's not many available. So I'm going to plug in my instance, and we just back out of that. I always feel like at this point, I should be clicking save, because in so many different places on Unreal, you have to make sure things are saved or compiled before things can happen. But with the settings, you don't need to do that. It automatically applies them. So nothing's different yet because the My Instance blueprint hasn't got any added functionality. So what I'm going to do is just a really simple thing, which is going to both show that the game instance class is persistent and show how to communicate with it from other classes. So I'm going to go into here, and it looks a bit like a standard blueprint, except there's no viewport. And this is because it's a data-only blueprint. It doesn't have objects or visible things that you can have in your world. And in fact, if you want to be technical about it, this is a blueprint which there will only be one instance made from it, and the Unreal engine will automatically make that and have that in place when the game is being played. So, but we've got some fairly standard stuff here. We've got an event graph, and what I want to do is I want to have a timer that is just counting down, and so to show you that timer is persistent across the different levels. So I'm going to start with a variable, which I'm just going to call timer. Let's have a capital timer, and zoom in for stuff like this because the text is quite small. I'm going to change this to be a floating point number, which means it's a number with a decimal point and digits after the decimal point. And I don't need to make it public because you don't edit instances of my instance blueprint. Right. But I do want to create a default value, which is we're going to start at 100. And this is going to be in seconds. It's going to count down from 100 seconds. Right. So what we really want is to be able to do this on a event tick. And I already know what the problem is because I've tried this out. If I right click on here, again, let's zoom in to have a look, and I'm going to type in tick. It doesn't bring up the event tick. And I wondered why. I went and looked it up, and I'm not the only person. It does not have access to the tick event in the game instance blueprint. I don't know why. There's usually, when there isn't access to something, there's usually a good reason for it somewhere in the depths of Unreal, because they try not to limit these things, I think. So we're going to need some other way of triggering this every tick. It's not too hard, to be honest. We'll do it with an external class. But what we're going to do is we're going to set up the functionality for that right now. So keep zooming in and out. And we're going to create a function. And we've done functions if you've been following my videos in sequence. We're going to call this one tick because it's going to take the place of a tick event. And so we're going to highlight that. And we need the delta seconds, which is the amount of time, which is fractional, since the drawn during the current frame, or since the last frame. For some reason, that's not changed when I went on it to float. There we are. That's happened now. And this is going to be quite simple. We can zoom out there, but actually zooming in there. And we're just going to make it so that we subtract the delta seconds from the timer, and then we display the timer on the screen using print string. So we're going to get the current value of timer, and we're going to do a minus, so subtract, and then we're going to set, so I'm dragging that in to create a setter. And that should do that setting of the current value of the timer. Just check that that's what it should be. Yes. And then we're going to do print string. Just drag it a bit because as we try and connect those two together, it will put an automatic converter between them from a floating point type bit of data to a string bit of data. And I'm going to click on this down arrow because there's other options in here. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to change the colour. I'm going to make this what colour shall we have? Let's have a nice greenish colour. And the other, you can change the duration here. I often change the duration and stuff if I've got long bits of information because you need to you need to be able to read it, and 2 seconds isn't enough. That's the length of time. But on this occasion, it's not going to be a problem because we're going to be updating it every tick, so the duration at 2 doesn't matter. This is an interesting one that I don't know if this is new, but it's certainly I've just discovered it. This key here, and if I put in a name for this key, whenever there's a new value, a new thing to be printed, if I've given it a key, it will put it in the place that the old one was. So normally when you do a lot of print strings, it will put them one on top of the other, and you'll get a big stream of them on the left-hand side. But if I just put a key in there, what it'll do is when it prints a new one, that will hide the old one, and so it just stays as one number up the top, and we'll just tick down. Okay, we should be able to compile that, and I'm just going to do a quick check on this. That I think that this is what we should be doing. So just checking, we've got the timer, we're taking off delta seconds, we're setting the timer new, and then we're printing it out to the screen. Okay, at the moment, this tick is not being called, so we shouldn't see anything on the screen yet. I'm just going to move that across into there, and hopefully prove that. So yes, if you look at the top left up here, it's not being displayed. Okay, so how do we actually get it to be displayed? Well, we need something that's going to call that tick function. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a really simple blueprint class just to do this. I'm going to make it as an actor, and I'm just going to call it my ticker. And so here, I'm not going to put anything that you can see in it. So it's going to be an actor and it's going to have presence in the world, but it's not going to be visible in that sense. And all we want is the event graph, because what we want is to be able to get this event tick and then get this to then call the game instance method class and invoke that tick function. So when we did functions a little while back, I did say that one of the important things about functions is that you can use them to have that functionality accessed by other scripts, and this is exactly what we're going to do here. The way to do this for the game instance class is it's actually really simple. We just need to right-click in a bit of empty space. So if you drag out from here, it won't work. And you try and type in get game instance, you see it's not happening. And that's because it's context sensitive, and the node that we're after isn't an execution node, so it knows that you've dragged out from execution. So instead, right-clicking in a blank space, I'm doing get game instance. So we're now coming across the fact that we have overridden the game instance class with our own version, and the functionality that we're trying to access is in our own version. And at this point, this value here thinks it is a generic game instance. It doesn't know it's a my instance. But this is where the inheritance thing comes in. It's part of a thing in object-oriented programming called polymorphism, which is that our game instance, our my instance class also looks like a game instance class. So children look like their parents is the way I usually explain this. I don't want to do this in detail, and if you don't follow that, don't worry too much. Just learn this as a bit of magic that you've got to do. So I'm going to pull out from the game instance. What I need to do is do what's a cast, which means I'm going to say I think this game instance is in fact a my instance, and I want you to refer to it or think of it as a my instance so we can access that functionality. And so cast to my instance. There we go. Now the pins out of here are, we've got, that's the normal exec out, but if it cast fails, so it means that this would mean is if the game instance that we had in play was a different game instance and not a my instance, then execution wouldn't come out of here, it would come out of here. But also the output from this thing, function of some kind, is that as well as a cast, not a function, so this is the instance as a my instance type. So we can now access the functionality. And what we want to do is tick. And that we've got that function in there that we can access. And so this is how to call that function. The icon on here looks like the icon for an event note, but it's blue because it's a function. It just uses the event icon. I don't actually know why. Toggle comment bubble. Let's forget that. Okay. So we need to plug the delta seconds in that we get in the event tick. I'll put that in there because it needs that information to be able to work. And we're going to compile that. Right, back to our level. So the other thing that we need to do, of course, is we don't have one of these in our level yet. So I'm just going to pull one in. And now we've got a ticker there. That ticker should be calling to the my instance class and making the timer happen. Let's demonstrate that. And so up at the top left here, you can see we've got this green text, which is the timer, which is counting down. So what's going to happen if we go and switch to the other level? Can you make a prediction? Here we go. What's happened is that the timer has stopped counting down and has in fact disappeared. If we go back, we'll actually find that the timer will resume and it'll go from where we left off. Okay, and the reason why it's not doing anything in the second level is because we don't have that ticker in the second level, so we need the ticker in the second level as well. Right, so here's the level that I made. Here's the one I made earlier, and we're just going to drag my ticker into here. And it doesn't matter where it is, it's actually outside the playing area. That doesn't matter at all. If we press play now, because we're in the editor, we're in the new level I created, that's where we'll be. But you can see that oh, I can't make that move for some reason because I've got control here. Hopefully, I mean, it's a bit small there. Let's do F11 so that we can zoom in at least a bit. F11, there we go. And control there. I hope we can see the timer ticking down on the top left side there. And as we move between levels, it's persistent and it keeps going. So that is my proof that the game instance class is the place to do persistence, or is a place that you can do persistence. Let's be clear about that. It's my favorite way of doing it. But we did see a wrinkle in that it doesn't have event tick. It's more likely that you'll be doing things in there like keeping some kind of meta score, or how many of something has been collected. And so what you wanted to do is exactly what the My Ticker class does, which is, but probably in your player character or somewhere else, being able to access functions or data in the game instance, in your own version of the game instance class. So I think that's probably enough for this time, so I'm going to say that's it from me for now.